Welcome to the Homegrown Podcast, a place where we share the truth about food and farming from our kitchen to yours. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today is number 4 of our real food journeys. We are so excited to bring on Kate. Kate, welcome to the show. We can't wait to tell your story today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you guys today.
We're pumped. And as we reiterated before we hit record, the whole purpose of these real food journeys is to give just hope, inspiration, and unique spotlights on different people wherever they are in their journey. So we have pulled from folks in the homegrown community, and we love bringing on, experts and people with tons of degrees and scientists and all of that. We love hearing from them, but we also just love hearing people's journeys and how real food has changed their lives and how they're able to make it in a realistic way. So, Kate, I want to start by having you tell us where it all began. Tell us where you grew up, where you're from, a little bit about you and your family in your early childhood.
Yeah, so I am from southeastern Pennsylvania, and I grew up in a really big family. I am one of 9 siblings. We're not always all together. My parents are divorced, so I have 3 full sisters, and then the rest of my siblings are half siblings. And my parents got divorced when I was very young. That's really all that I know. And that caused a lot of stress growing up. And I kind of took that stress and I fixated it onto my body. And I just always was like, I'm too big. I'm not good enough. And then that kind of developed into an eating disorder at a very young age. Starting around like first grade, I can remember like my first thoughts, like, I'm just too big. I need to lose weight as like a first grader. Like, wow. Looking back, even at just pictures of myself, like, I can't even believe that's what I thought and that's how I was feeling. But it was so real. And those thoughts like still carry with me today, like definitely not as extreme, but it was definitely a way that I was coping with just all of the dysfunction that was happening at home. And yeah, so I struggled with an eating disorder growing up, starting super young. And that kind of was the beginning of my real food journey.
Did anyone know at that point, like in the first grade, did your parents or any of your siblings have any idea that those thoughts were going through your head?
I definitely would make comments like, oh, I'm too fat or things like that. I also, for some reason, a lot of my best friends were like super, super skinny, and I was always comparing myself to them. Yeah. And I was always a very muscular kid. Like, I just put on muscle super easily. And to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm just too big. Why am I like this and no one else is?
Yeah, I definitely can resonate with that. At what point did you identify, and maybe you didn't use these words, but what point did you say, okay, this has turned into like a full-blown eating disorder, not just bad thoughts, not just negative eating patterns, but like we are in this deep, basically?
Yeah, so that was my sophomore year of high school, because it was definitely just disordered eating all throughout growing up. But then sophomore year of high school, my 2 oldest sisters are both out of the house. It was a difficult time. And I just really was like, I need to change how I look. And I lost an extreme amount of weight in a very short amount of time and just looked so sickly. I lost all my muscle. Like, I was a dancer. I ran track. I did tumbling. And then just in a matter of 3 months, you wouldn't have even been able to guess that.
Wow.
And so that started my sophomore year of high school. And then my junior year, the day after Christmas, I was admitted into an in-person and a residential facility for eating disorder recovery. So I was there. Yeah, I was there for 2 months. I should have stayed longer, but for insurance reasons, I had to leave. Did outpatient for a month and then went back to school in April. Wow. I was only in school for like 3 or 4 more weeks because I was so mad that I was in treatment. I was like, I have to undo all this that they just did to me. So I was like, and for anyone who's never been in eating disorder treatment, when you're there, you learn how to have an eating disorder. I learned so many things. I was like, oh, like, that's good. I never even thought of that. Like, so really a disordered way of looking at it. But I came home and I was like, okay, I'm going to put all of this into practice, everything I just learned.
Mm.
And so then in less than a month, I was admitted into the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and I was there for 3 weeks, and then went to another residential facility inpatient in Denver, Colorado, and I was there for about 2.5 months.
Wow.
And yeah, then I came home and I was so angry. I was like, I'm going to undo all this again. But I was like, I'm going to do it slower so nobody notices. I'm never going through treatment again. And so my eating disorder, my diagnosis was anorexia, but
Okay.
I never didn't want to eat except for that little brief period of time between my 2 treatments. I struggled more with orthorexia.
Okay.
And I think this was before like people were really recognizing that disorder. And because I love food, I absolutely love cooking. Like my mom always cooked really fun things growing up. Like I loved helping her in the kitchen. It was just, okay, how can I eat the most food possible but still lose weight? And so basically I did that by just being vegan, which I love dairy products. I don't know how I did it because I absolutely can't live without milk or ice cream. But yeah, so it was more orthorexia, just eating only clean foods and exercising way too much.
Is orthorexia more of like a fear of? Help me understand more of what that means.
Yeah, I would say it's like a fear of eating an unhealthy food. Is that how
Yeah.
you would also describe it, Kate?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, it's just like obsessed with being healthy, and you take it to an extreme.
Like you wouldn't eat a chocolate chip. Like you wouldn't even touch something that you would deem in your head like not okay.
And in your head, it could be anything. You could just be
It could
like,
be anything.
that for some reason I've identified as not.
Totally.
And in this case, orthorexia is around the idea of losing weight or having some kind of figure, and therefore I'm avoiding,
Yeah, or it could just
high
be
caloric foods or whatever.
or it could just be I'm scared of being unhealthy. Like you don't want to eat out because you're scared of the vegetable oils that are inevitably in all the fast food or even restaurants. And so like you just wouldn't ever eat out. There's a million examples, and that term has become more well known because as the real food movement has really taken off and people have opened their eyes to just the mass manufacturing of our food, it's so easy to swing the pendulum the other way and go crazy with it and then panic and say, well, now I can't eat anything. And, is this from a CAFO? And, just you could go down. And I know people in our community struggle with that for sure. And I think all of us have a little bit of that in us if we are being honest, especially as women. And it's just something you got to keep in check, but it sounds like for you, Kate, for that period of time, you were letting it drive every single food decision. You were like, these are my food parameters and I'm not veering from it.
Yeah, and I was very disciplined with it.
Yep.
And like I went 7 years without eating desserts.
Yeah,
like, wow. I don't know how I did that. I love sweets. Like I need a sweet treat like every day. And I set those rules for myself and I was like, I have to follow them because I needed to control everything that went into my body.
I think that's really powerful. What you just said is you set those rules for yourself. And that's one of the things you talk about and break down in eating disorder recovery. Because I too went to inpatient treatment. I did 2 months inpatient. And then there was it was kind of like a halfway house on like the 3rd month that you would do. You like lived in a house still with nurses and people monitoring you, but you had a little bit more freedom. So it was 3 months total. And breaking down your food rules, making you face your fear foods, right? All this language to try to almost like use exposure therapy to reacclimate ourselves into society. I'm so interested in your time in the various treatment centers. What was the conversation like about real food? Was there ever a nutritional lean? Was there ever information talking to you about like macronutrients or the value of food, or like what was your experience in that?
It was a pretty negative one. Looking back, like I am really angry at the things that they taught me. I remember one of my first sessions with my dietitian. She was like, your body doesn't care if you eat a Pop-Tart or an apple. Like they both are the same. So just eat what we give you. And I was like, that was one of my first like sessions with her, and I was just thinking to myself, these people do not know what they're talking about, because a Pop-Tart is not the same thing as an apple.
Mm-hmm.
And so that made me really angry. And I know, like, it's a business. They're trying, like, they need to get different patients in and out. Like, I just felt like I was there to just gain weight. It didn't matter how I did it. And so I can get out as quickly as possible so a bed would be open for somebody else.
Yeah.
But I do remember, and this did stick with me when I was in the hospital, like not the residential facility, but just like the regular hospital. The one dietitian I did talk to, he was like, you just need to eat. Your food right now is medicine. Some people who have like heart problems, they have to take XYZ medication, but right now your food is medicine. And so like that really stuck with me. Even though they weren't feeding us great food, like it was a lot of foods that you're taught not to eat if you don't want to be obese or have like high blood pressure or things like this.
Totally.
And so like the meal plan didn't line up with what he was saying, but once I left and I decided to recover on my own, I took that with me. I'm like, food will be my medicine, and that's how I will heal.
What was your food like both in your treatment center and at the hospital? I'm curious.
It was like, oh my gosh, just a lot of pasta and like burgers, and they gave me soda on my first day in the hospital. I'm like, are you for real? I'm not like, and I can't drink bubbles, like, and it's not an eating disorder thing at all. I just can't swallow them.
Yeah.
And I was so upset. I'm like, please, can you give me, like, I'm hungry. I don't want to not eat. Just give me something that's healthy. And so yeah, a lot of pasta, a lot of Gatorade. I don't know if you had to drink a lot of Gatorade. I had to chug a whole thing of Gatorade every morning for 2 months straight. I was so angry. Oh my gosh.
Is that to replenish your electrolytes? Were they concerned?
So yeah, they would do vitals every morning. At like 4 a.m, we'd have to get up. And so if you were orthostatic, meaning like your heart rate went up too quickly when you stood up, then you'd have to sit there and drink a whole thing of Gatorade before you could go back to bed. And that happened every single day when I was there.
Shoot.
And I was like, I know this isn't good for me. I like just why can't I? There has to be a better option than Gatorade.
Part of the objective of these facilities is not only to help you recover from it sounds like it's almost like exposure therapy.
It is.
Right? And so I'm definitely on the side of we should be eating good food. But I'm also wondering, is there a case to be made that there's something good going on there of trying to break? Maybe not. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Because like there's two things at play here. There's the tension of they're feeding us junk, right? In a place that should be helping us learn to recover better. Not disputing that. But there's also a factor here where what it sounds like some of this fear and anxiety and hesitancy towards certain foods, the rules, as you might call them, that we had created, we might need to, break that to end that way of thinking, potentially. I'm just curious what you guys' thoughts are on that.
I have an opinion, but I want to hear Kate's reaction first.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, I did need to eat those foods to realize food isn't scary.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really any education about nutrition. They were just like, you eat what we give you, or you have to get Boost, which was like
Ensure,
or you have to get tubed.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. Like, so I was just eating just to comply, to get out, to then go back to my behaviors when I left. And so to your point, Joey, yes, I think that was good to eat some of these fear foods of mine. But when they're saying a Pop-Tart is the same as an apple, I don't think
that's sketchy.
Is the way to go. I think they should have taught us about real food and like where food came from and why we need it, and how you should eat grass-fed beef and that meat's not scary. Like, I don't know. I just don't think the education was there. Like,
you didn't learn about macronutrients at all. Like, no idea of protein intake and fat and carbohydrates, nothing like this?
I feel like they would say you need those things, but it wasn't really teaching you exactly how to build your own meal plan. And that was another thing. We were just fed what they gave, like our dietitian planned for us. There was never any, oh, you can work with us to create your meal plan. Because, like, what were we supposed to do when we went home? You know?
I know.
There wasn't really any education to get you out, like, once you're back into the real world. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to fall back into my
That's a
old
good point.
behaviors.
Yeah, and they would never let you know. One, you were never allowed to know your caloric intake, and you would never be allowed to know your grams per macronutrient. There's no chance they would be like, yeah, you're on a schedule of eating 200 grams of carbs every day, because we weren't even allowed to know how much we weighed. I mean, we had to get weighed back, facing backwards. We couldn't see the scale. If you accidentally forgot and washed your hair on weigh day, they made you blow dry your hair before you went on the scale, because they didn't want anything impacting their like version of vitals for you. So like we were totally left in the dark, because that's a way of utilizing your eating disorder to control your food. Like if they had told us, hey, this is the calorie count your meal plan is currently on, that would totally trigger one person over the next. You know what I'm saying? So we like kind of had to be left in the dark, at least where I went. So we couldn't really have that education. And then the only education we really did have was like, hey, if you have a fear around sweets and things like that, or if this is a food, I was bulimic, not anorexic. So if this was a typical binge food for you, or, you know, exposure to this made you like slip back into those habits, it was trying to expose you to that food in a way where like, then you were never allowed to act on your urges, obviously, because you're being watched in the bathroom. And ever since I left there, I keep going back to the opposite of an eating disorder is not seeing all food as nutritionally equal. Like that's not the opposite of an eating disorder. The opposite of an eating disorder or a healthy view of food is being able to see food for its nutrient worth and understand that we are worth nourishing ourselves and not holding back, and understanding that protein and fat and carbs are all good and they all have their place. We can derive them from a number of different beautiful foods. But to say that a Pop-Tart and an apple are the same, I got the same message as you, Kate. And it's like, that is the piece that is so damaging, I feel, because when we leave, then what do? We wake up in the morning and we don't know. We were just basically trained a calorie in, a calorie out. And it's just, to me, it's incredibly detrimental to girls who leave there and then they feel like they have no real grasp. Now, we did have some menu planning in the latter half of my treatment, but I didn't really utilize it.
So we don't count calories or give calorie counts because it could be triggering and or
it's another way you can control your food.
To control food. However, like there's no education around the optimal levels of different things your body needs to perform at its peak. Okay.
Not for me. Kate, did you have any conversation?
Yeah, not really. And we also like weren't allowed to move, like do any exercise. Like if anyone was shaking their knee, you know, like if you're anxious like that, they'd be like, "Oh, you need to drink some Boost." Like, so it's like, okay, when can you exercise? Like how do you balance that in? Because it was just all bad. Any movement was bad, and I understand that because like my health was in danger, and like doing any extra movement could have put me back on my plan. But there wasn't any education. Like, what do you do once you recover?
Yeah, there was nothing. I'll never forget one of the girls was getting up and down off the couch, because like we had to sit on couches basically. It was getting up and down off the couch to like organize her books, but we all knew like she had a tendency to over exercise, and so she was just trying to move her body any way she could. And then like at night when the BHTs would be in the hallway, she'd be like doing crunches on the floor, and I was just like, girl.
No,
like,
there was a girl like that at my, like she was always in a crunch position. I'm like, this is too funny.
So
not really.
It's true though, because like at some point where I went, you could kind of graduate and get to a point where you could like incorporate exercise, and we got to go on a walk once a week. That was our exercise. It was a walk once a week. But they didn't educate you on, imagine if they would have taken us to a farm and showed us how food is grown, and then showed us like taking us to a gym, and we could have thrown around some weights and realized like this is how you build muscle, and you you encourage longevity, can you just imagine how different you would have left feeling from there? And then if they talked to you about your identity and they were like, listen, you're worthy of this. And I don't know if your facility had a faith background or not, but I can just going through that. Can't you just think of 20 ways that we could have had a better experience?
Well, definitely, because those things are ultimately how I was able to recover on my own.
Yeah.
And I think about my experience there and I'm like, how can we make this better so that way? Because I really just left there angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so mad at my parents. I'm like, how could you do that to me? And looking back, I'm like, they had to. Like, I would have died if they didn't. But I would pray that anyone who goes into those facilities would come out feeling hopeful that like they can get better and getting better is worth it. And I think that there's a lot of improvement to be done in those kinds of places.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So what was it then, Kate, that take us along that kind of latter part of the journey? So you're coming out of these facilities. How did you kind of take this on and figure a way out?
Yeah, so I came back home from Colorado right when my senior year of high school was starting, and I had basically missed most of my junior year. And I told my parents, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to school. Like, that is so embarrassing. And luckily, I only had a couple of classes left to take, so I was able to easily just do online school and finish things out. And this was pre-COVID, so I just was able to do online school, not like a hybrid kind of thing. And yeah, so I worked at Trader Joe's at the time. It was so fun. I loved working there. And I just experienced a lot of freedom and like what it meant to be an adult. And like, and I, when I would work at Trader Joe's during the day, I'm like, this is so weird that people are out and about during the school day. Like, people actually do stuff during the day. And so it was just like a time of growing and like maturing for me. But at the same time, I was still intentionally trying to undo all my treatment and lose weight. But I had to be more strategic. And so I kind of focused on how else could I restrict in my life. And I came across zero waste. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this movement. So like I read Bea Johnson's book and I was like, okay, I'm going to be zero waste. I would get so mad at my family when they would get plastic grocery bags or get straws at a restaurant. And so that was kind of an unhealthy thought process, how I got into that. But it did lead me to start shopping at farmers markets. And I learned what a CSA was. And so I started eating like fresh local produce for the sole purpose of being less wasteful and like having plastic, like not having plastic around the vegetables. And so that was my senior year. Then I graduated and I did a dental assisting program because I thought I wanted to be a dentist. And my goal was to be a bilingual dentist and travel Latin American countries and do like dentistry.
Sounds
and
awesome.
just travel around. And so I started college and I was studying pre-dentistry and Spanish. And then my spring semester of freshman year was when lockdown happened. So I was also working at a dentist office, but I couldn't go because of quarantine. And meanwhile, like through all of this, my eating disorder is like really bad still, but I'm not making it as obvious. I don't think like I looked too skinny, but I don't think like everyone was as concerned. But so then the dentist called me about 3 months later and they were like, "Oh, you can come back to work." And I like was really upset. And I was like, "Why am I so upset? I was really enjoying my work. I was like I liked school." And I realized this is not what's going to fulfill me in life. I don't think I want to do this. And so I was like, okay, I'll finish this semester and I'm not going to go back to school. If everything's going to be online, I'm not going to go undecided. So I was still working at Trader Joe's and I was talking to one of my bosses there. And I said, I had my whole life planned out and now I don't know what to do. And I'm a planner. So I was freaking out because I didn't have any next steps. And she said something that just changed my life completely. She was like, Kate, I could see you growing things. And I was like, what? That is such a weird answer. But I was like, okay, like that's super interesting. Let me explore that a little bit. And so I started just reading books about farming. I read Letters to a Young Farmer, and that was really a good book. Like, it made me cry just reading all of those. I'm like, I want to do this. And I also watched Kiss the Ground, the documentary on Netflix, and I was like, that is it. Regenerative agriculture is what I need to do. So I thought I was going to go to school for it, and I started talking to an admissions advisor, and she was like, oh, like, as you move along in your degree, you're going to have to do like some experiential learning related to your degree, somehow related to farming, if that's what you go into. And she told me about WOOF, which is Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So you could go and work for farmers in exchange for food and a place to stay. I was like, well, I'm going to do that before I start another degree that I don't want to finish. So I found a farm on Lopez Island, Washington that I really liked. And I packed up my car and I drove across the country and I moved there. And I was there for about 8 or 9 months. And I absolutely loved it. The couple that I worked for was just incredible. They were so patient with me. I literally had no idea what I was doing. One of the first things I did was transplant spinach. And I was like, wait, you just put this in the ground and then we're going to have spinach to eat for months? And they're like, yes. And I had no idea just how food was grown. And I just absolutely adored my time there. It was so amazing. But at the same time, I was really struggling with my eating disorder. Definitely. And I thought I was better. Like, in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm fine. But now I look back on pictures and I'm like, I really was not well at all. And I also reconnected with God during this time because I was away from home in a different time zone. I just needed something. You know, I was really lonely. I have a twin sister, and she was like, just go to church. I'm like, I don't think that's going to help, but I'll go. And I went, and I just met these incredible women who just really encouraged me to build my relationship with God again. And so I did a lot of growing in my faith when I was there as well. But then I decided, I was like, I'm ready to go home. If I knew I wanted to farm. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. But I was like, if I have a farm, I want my family to enjoy it. So I'm going to go back to the East Coast. And I remember I was driving through Washington on my way home, and something came over me, and I was like, I'm so sick of living like this, like planning out every last thing I eat, being so concerned about food, feeling like I had no energy at all. And I was like, I'm going to get better. And I decided, like, on my way home, it's like my eating disorder is staying in Washington. Like, it's not coming home with me. And so I come home and I just like am very intentional about just eating a lot. And I'm like, I need to gain weight. I need to get my period back. I hadn't had a period. I'm 20 years old at this point, and I hadn't had a period yet because of my eating disorder.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I was just really intentional. I stopped all exercise because I was working out every day. And I was like, okay, like, we're just going to get better. It's going to be really hard, but like, God's going to walk me through this and I'm going to be fine. And so about 2 months after I came home, I started working on a farm in Maryland. And this was actually such a great place for me to be, to heal from my eating disorder, because they had community dinner every week. And I was like forced to have all these exposures. And I remember one of the first nights I was there, someone had made chocolate cake and everyone was eating it. And I was like, I don't eat sweets. But then someone was like, come on, Kate, like, have a piece. And no one knew what was going on. So I was like, I have to eat it. And I remember that so vividly. I was like, wow, I just ate a piece of chocolate cake and I didn't die. Like, it's fine. And so I was also a vegetarian most of my life until I started farming. I was like, oh, meat isn't actually bad for you. You really need it. And so I started eating meat. And then I felt weight restored. And I was like, I really love dairy. I need to start eating dairy again. So I found a farm that had raw milk. And I was like, where has raw milk been all of my life? It is so good. And so then I was like, I need a cow. I need to get a cow. So I asked the farmers, I'm like, can you please get a cow? They're like, no, we won't get you a cow, but I know the neighbors who they were good friends with really want a cow too. And I was like, perfect. So we bought a cow together. And that was a really big step in my eating disorder recovery because I'm like, wow, for years I was terrified of dairy. And now I just bought myself a cow.
Wow.
And I was like, this is incredible. And because as I was farming in Maryland, like I was learning like, real food is all you need to nourish your, like it's just eat real food and everything's going to be fine. Eat food as God intended it, you know?
Yep.
And so I was like, wow, real food, farming, it all saved my life because now like food is for nourishment. I love being a part of the growing process and knowing like when I was at that farm in Maryland, most of my meals I was a part of. Like I helped raise the meat, we grew all the vegetables, we had eggs, I was making cheese, making yogurt, just it was so much fun. And so farming is really how I found recovery because I knew how food was being raised and that food is not a bad thing. I do think our culture, like going into the grocery store and having all like these food like substances, I think that is very problematic. And that caused a lot of problems with me growing up because I'm like, food is bad because of some of the ways that we're processing them. But really, food is good and we need it. And I love food. I'm always cooking something up in the kitchen and my family gets so mad because I make such a mess. But I'm like, hey, at least I'm eating. You can't get mad at me because you guys put me in the hospital when I wasn't eating.
Heck yeah.
So, but yeah, that's how I found recovery.
I love that. I love that you just said food like substances too, referring to a lot of the stuff that's in the grocery store, because to me, it's like even you being able to say, like, that's my point, is like you being able to stand here today and differentiate between nutrient dense whole food that God intended and foods that aren't going to serve you as well. If they're your main source of calories, right? If they're your main source of sustenance, like that is what true healing is. And this is why we say food education leads to food freedom, because I really feel like once you learn where food comes from, how it's produced, it almost like removes you out of it and opens you up to the bigger picture of what is food. And like there's so many things that go into either growing vegetables or your dairy cow, or it goes into the meat you're raising or the meat you're hunting or whatever that looks like. So I love that your story, while I hate that you had to suffer through those years, and I resonate with that, I love that I can hear it in your voice. You have found this food freedom through real food. And that's exactly why we wanted to tell your story. So
I mean, what I'm learning is, man, if you're dealing with something challenging like an eating disorder, buy a cow. It just seems like that's the play. And clearly, right, that's, all kidding aside, that was funny. That was, to hear that.
But maybe go work on a farm. Maybe find a way to engage with food that isn't you taking a bite, right? Like maybe that also helped you when you're like, okay, I'm engaging with this food, but the pressure isn't on me to like eat it right now. And instead, I'm just going to grow it. Maybe that's like dipping your toe in the water, you know, getting used to it, being around what it looks like to produce food, making a loaf of bread, even if you give it away to a neighbor at first because you're still worried about it. Like, baby steps, and I think that can be super powerful.
How did you get in contact with these farms to begin with?
Through Wolf was how I found the farm in Washington. And then there are other, Wolf is kind of more if you just want to travel. Like a lot of farmers don't actually like getting woofers because they don't always work super hard and people just want a like cheap way to travel. But then I found the one in Maryland through ATRA, which is like a place where farmers put internships. So that one was more serious. I was there for over a year living there, and you get a stipend when you're an intern wolfing. Well, I wasn't even technically wolfing in Washington. They were like, don't say you're wolfing because you're not, because we pay you a stipend. But yeah, you can find them on Wolf, ATRA. You can even just contact them. Farmers love getting help. So if anyone's interested in farming, just contact a farmer and reach out, see if you can work with them.
That's a great tip. I'm curious, have you kept in contact with anyone that you cross paths on from any of your treatment times or facilities, and have you heard their success stories mimic yours, or is your story unique to you? Do you know what I'm saying?
So we weren't really allowed to know any personal information about the other patients.
Oh,
It's like we didn't
interesting.
even know their last names.
What?
I will say though, I have a twin sister and we both were in treatment together.
Okay.
And so we are both in recovery, and she's interested in real food and like cooking from scratch, but nowhere near to the extent that I am. Yeah, she kind of is like, okay, Kate, like we get it. You want to farm, you want to have a homestead, like, but she likes to cook with me, and she's also in recovery. I think she was just sick of being sick, and she was ready to be better.
Mm-hmm. That's wild that you didn't know. I feel like I knew everything about the girls I was in with, and still to this day am in contact with several of them. But that's wild. I never even thought about keeping not being able to talk to them. The identity piece is always something that has stuck with me personally, and I want to hear from you, Kate, how this plays out, because when you said you made the switch from focusing on food to focusing on zero waste, both of those are really they can be identifying characteristics, right, of someone. If you like meet someone at a party, you're like, ooh, I'm either a vegetarian or a vegan, or I'm into zero waste, right?
Yeah.
So it's just it's an effective tool to help shape your identity, but it's not always like, obviously our identity shouldn't be rooted in anything of this world. But I want to hear from you how your understanding of your kind of new identity in recovery has been helpful, because I know for me personally, a lot of my identity was in the fact that I have an eating disorder, and when you lose that piece of you, you feel like, you need to replace it with something maybe, or you need to heal in some way. So how has that kind of transition played out for you?
It was really hard. I was always known like as the girl in the family who didn't eat dessert, and I was like, that's me. Like, I look at me, I'm so strong. I don't have to eat dessert. And then once like I started eating more foods and incorporating a diversity of foods into my diet, I was like, well, yeah, who am I then if I like don't have this willpower? And I was also gaining weight. I was like, okay, I'm no longer like the super skinny one. And that was tough too. And then I like did transfer my identity. It's like, okay, now I'm a farmer. Now I'm strong. Now I eat anything. But like my main identity was being a farmer. And like I was also, because I was able to eat more, like I was putting on more muscle. And like I said earlier, I just put on muscle easily. And so that was another thing. Like a lot of the people that I worked with, they were like, wow, you're just so strong. And so like that was my new thing. It's like, okay, I need to be super strong. So like I was kind of dabbling in like over exercising when I was farming. Like I would wake up at like 4:30 in the morning, go to the gym, milk my cow, then start work.
Wow.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is bad. Like I'm going backwards and like over exercising and doing too much. And so yeah, I'm still trying to find my identity, because it was, now I'm a farmer. And then I actually recently hurt my back at the end of last growing season. So I'm still recovering from that. And I don't think I'm going to be farming full time this season, because I want to farm. I want that to be my livelihood. So like I'm trying to take this injury seriously and not hurt myself. But I was like, well, now I'm not a farmer either. So like, who am I? And that's when I'm like, no, my identity is in the Lord. Like it doesn't matter what I do here on earth. Like God's the one who helped me recover, and like I just need to grow in my faith, and that's who I am. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters besides that.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think everyone in recovery has to face that really, really painful acceptance that our old identity no longer suits us. And there's a lot of beauty that comes from that. Obviously, we're not sick anymore. We're We're not undernourished anymore. We're not harming ourselves anymore. But when you walk around for a decade or more with that identity, it's a big deal to shift. And I think you expressing that was perfect. And like, honestly, it's one of the bravest questions you can even ask yourself. So I think that's really cool, really powerful.
Like a prodigal son kind of story going on here, right?
Yeah. The cow. I mean, it all came full circle with the cow.
You're chasing all kinds of identities out there. You know what I'm saying? Next thing you know, you're coming back. And, I love it.
The Lord, man.
Yeah,
it's always the Lord. I want to hear, walk us through, I know you're in a weird season because you're recovering from injury, but walk us through some of your life today and how you view real food on an everyday basis.
Yeah. So right now I'm actually nannying. Just,
fun.
To make some money while I'm not working. But I'm still very intentional about what I eat, but like not in like a controlling kind of way, but just not like falling victim of just convenience foods. I make a lot of sourdough. I love sourdough bread. I have it almost every day. I've actually been starting to make little sourdough tortillas with sourdough discard. It's so easy. I'm like, why haven't I been doing this my whole life? But so that's really good. And I eat, I don't know, just a lot of vegetables and eggs and produce. And I try, something I do struggle with though, with my recovery is being judgmental of how other people eat. And not being like, oh, like that's not real food. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't eat that because that's fake food. Like I say that to my little siblings sometimes and they're like, okay, Kate, we get it. Like you don't eat this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, geez, I need to stop being so judgmental. They're kids. They're just having fun, enjoying. And the food that my parents buy for them, it's like they don't necessarily control what's in the house. So that is something for me to work on in recovery.
You're not the only person, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't have to.
I'll be the first person to raise my hand and say, yo, Kate, I've been there. I'll be like at my office or I'll walk through the grocery store sometimes and I'll be like telling myself like, you need to chill. Like it is not like these people are
Do you look in the carts?
Having
yes. No, I know. I'm like, how are you buying that?
There is no mortal sin here. But I will say sometimes I'll watch some homie roll out of Kroger with like 60 bottles of Pepsi. And I'll think to myself, please let this be like some school experiment or something and not let this be like this man's. Yeah, I didn't see any Mentos.
Dang.
But it was, I'll see that come sometimes and I won't tell the stranger in the grocery store that, hey, you're, killing yourself slowly. But I will say to myself, like, man, even me feeling some kind of way is totally not healthy for me. It's not helpful. It's not helping me at all. And it's certainly not helping them. And we will catch our kids sometimes telling their friends or their cousins or their grandmother that what's what about food. And I don't know. I think we should strive to be more accepting, more loving, more caring, and have more empathy for people.
Yeah.
And anyhow, yeah, we're right there with you, Kate.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
It's true.
We could do better.
Yep. Part of it for me too is like, I always think about like, how much money are you spending on that? Like that money is not equating to good nutrients into your body. So either you're rich and you're like, you got money to blow on soda because I can't afford to buy something that's not going to serve me in some way, shape, or form. And so that's always like the second. And then I'm like, you know what? I can't control. I shouldn't try to control their life. I can only focus on myself.
And I want to reposition or maybe repackage what you just said. Can we afford like the cheeseburger or the soda?
Oh, sure.
Yes. But when you say afford, you're almost saying like, we can't justify spending the money that we would rather reserve for something that actually can sometimes cost more.
Yeah.
Okay. So because we say this stuff sometimes and people are like, they're dumbfounded and they get frustrated about the budgeting and dollars for real food. And the thought here is that your grocery bill might look the same, but we're bringing home less items from the store. And the thought is those items will do more for us than what, having bags of chips and sodas and things. Because instead of drinking the sodas, we just drink water. Right. So anyways, Sorry.
But hey, if I want a soda, I'll get an Olipop, you know?
Bang, bang, boom.
I don't ever. That's the thing where it's like, I'll never forget when I was at Remuda, we'd have this like restaurant times where we would have to actually go out and eat as a group.
Mhm.
And I would always order Diet Coke because I was like, I like the flavor, but also like it was 0 calories. And I think they were like, well, you should order the regular because this is an eating disorder behavior. And I was like, no, I just like the Diet Coke better. And now I don't drink it anymore. But then I found Olipops, which taste so similar to Colt. Do you know what an Olipop is? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
So it's like a carbonated beverage or like mineral water. And it's like this is full circle again. Our old food rules that didn't serve us, where we were like, we can only have this version of this food or we can't have this food at all. Then we move into what the eating disorder treatment facility people wanted us to say, which is that all food is good and you shouldn't have any rules. 2, hey, is there a better option I can buy for myself, both or for my family? Either it's going to serve us better, it's not going to be as detrimental in its impact on my body, or it's going to be more affordable, or it's going to be more life-giving. And then it's like, that's the full circle movement, right?
Mhm.
It's many things in my life that I can find where I'm like, I'm not fearful of that dang thing, but like, I don't want it, or this is the version of it that I'm choosing because I honestly feel better about that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's the food freedom piece that I think is just really hard to articulate unless you kind of go all in all the points.
And
You
I
know
will
what I
say
mean?
there have been
Yeah.
foods that I have just cut out completely.
Sure.
And because
Like what? Like a
like
Cheeto?
Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
Okay.
Okay. They were just my thing. Obsessed. Loved the Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
Kate, he would eat an entire bag.
Whole bag.
I was worried for his colon, honestly.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? You condition yourself correctly. You can eat whatever you want, and you feel fantastic.
Colon of steel.
Steel or just molten lava, one of the two. Anyhow, the Flame Punches, I loved them so much. Everything about them, and I have not like sought out like a replacement for Flamin' Hot Cheetos. I've just identified in my brain those were for pure, just like stress-induced eating. And did I like the flavor of them? Yes, but did they serve me at all? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I can justify cutting them out in my brain is primarily one, because I don't want to set myself up to have low energy or to not be able to perform, not to be able to get my next workout in, not do well like at the office or around my kids. I come home from work. I don't want to be the guy that gets home from work and I just don't have energy. I mean, I can be stressed or have a frustrating day, or want to like decompress or just talk to Elizabeth without the kids in my face.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Cheetos were not serving me well, because I think there's a line there to be drawn for me, and my line was drawn at Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Now with snack foods, I'm a snacker.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy snacks, so oftentimes I'll after dinner I will have other foods to
Mhm.
eat.
Like pot sticker per se.
I like pot
I like a
stickers.
pot sticker.
I'm down with the pot stickers, and I'm also down with, we've been doing, we will often do sourdough goods that will help me kind of fill that void.
Like a pizza or something.
Yeah. So anyhow, I think for me there are some lines that I've drawn.
Yeah, I'm interested, Kate, if you're willing to share. Like, well, you mentioned sourdough already, and it
Mhm.
sounds like you've dove headfirst into dairy because you invested in a cow.
Yeah, Homegirl's got some dairy.
Homegirl's got some dairy. So, like, for you, when you're thinking of food now, it's complete 180 to what you used to, one as a vegan and vegetarian, but also, how do you approach a food that might have previously been a sticking point for you? Like, do you feel like there's room for an ice cream if it has raw milk and whatever you're making, or have you not yet established kind of where you have felt comfortable in those different areas?
Yeah, I will try to have, like, I'll make my own ice cream
Mm-hmm.
would be the ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But if my family's having ice cream from the store, I'll have ice cream from the store.
Oh, beautiful.
Like,
Yeah.
I've really gotten to the point, like, it's been a little bit over 2 years now that I was like, okay, I need to get better, and I just really worked to reframe those thoughts, and I could be, because I used to like not be able to go out with my family because I'm like, I don't know what food's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so undernourished that like I couldn't skip a meal. Like, so I would just stay home. But now I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out. There might be food there that I don't necessarily want to eat, but it'll be okay. It'll be one meal. And we can, if you just move past it. And that took a really long time to get to. And sometimes it's still difficult. Like, I will still have those negative thoughts afterwards that, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, I'm going to gain like 50 pounds after one meal. And it's like, okay, Kate, that's not true. That can't even be possible. But yeah, my goal ideally would be to know where most of my food came from. But even now in this time of an injury, like, I had to move back home. And so I'm not on a farm anymore. And that's actually been eye-opening. It's like, oh, okay, Kate, like, you can eat vegetables from the store. I know it's not going to be your favorite, but they're still vegetables. Like, it's going to be okay. Just farmers markets are going to open up soon. I'll be able to shop there. So it really is just like a reframing of your thoughts, especially when you're coming from a place of restriction as opposed to like trying to cut out flaming hot Cheetos. Like, I went so long without eating any junk food. I say that in quotations, but like, so now it's like when I want a snack, I have yogurt and peanut butter. Like, I don't even, there's really nothing at the, like, snack foods at the store that I even like am tempted to buy. And I think that's just because of years of me not allowing myself to eat them. So I really don't even miss them. So I don't really feel like I have any gaps to fill. But yeah, ice cream is one of my downfalls sometimes. I'm like, I just need ice cream. It's one of my favorite foods.
Hey, ice cream sounds outstanding.
Well, and I love, like, I asked the question very cautiously because if you were going to say, like, I don't eat ice cream unless I make it myself, which I would have totally been like, honor you where you are. But it actually sounds like you're moving further away from maybe that, I'm going to call it orthorexia mindset of like, I have to control every ingredient, which would still probably be in that camp. And that's part of the journey, right? I find myself falling back into that trap sometimes too.
Yeah.
So if you were to give me that answer, I wouldn't have batted an eye, but I asked super cautiously in case that was going to be your answer. But I love that you said, listen, my family has ice cream. It's not necessarily what I might buy or what I would do all the time, but I have no problem eating that. And if anyone has battled with an eating disorder, you know how powerful this statement that is that you just said. So I think that's wonderful and amazing. And I think like that's the goal, right? Is to, one, view food as like give it its true value, which is just to nourish and satiate us so that we can go on and do what we're called to do. Don't put anything higher than that. And then also, like, from there, take every meal and snack and opportunity to nourish yourself one by one in your recovery journey, because that's really what it is. And I think that if you're, you know, at any point in the journey from listening to Kate's story, if you're, you know, 2 years in the past or 5 years in the future, whatever that looks like for you, we can all recognize the steps that you've walked. And so I think that this whole conversation is powerful for women that I think have walked this journey too, because I definitely resonate.
What about alcohol? Do you drink alcohol?
I don't really drink. I think it just tastes really bad. I'm not really a big fan. And like I've had a little bit, and I just don't like how it makes me feel. Like, I honestly get kind of sad.
Yeah.
And then I like try to overcompensate. I'm like, oh no, like I'm fine. But really, I'm like, why did I drink? It makes me feel sad. So yeah, I don't really drink.
You know, it's funny. Alcohol is one of the few food items, products, beverages, whatever you want to call it, that if you reject it in a situation, people are immediately curious as to why you're rejecting it. You know, like, did you have a problem? Are you sober now? You know, what is it? It's something that I've lately, because I used to enjoy alcohol regularly, and I would, you know, have beers or bourbon. I got into bourbon heavy. Not like I was like drinking too much, but I was actually just collecting it. And I would drink it, but not. I mean, it wasn't. I don't believe I had some sort of problem. Probably had more of a problem buying it than I did drinking it. Anyhow, and I've recently, in the past, I don't know, what would you call it, year, made the kind of shift into not drinking, and it started off with a I'm not drinking because it was impacting my performance running or playing soccer or whatever thing I was training for at that time. And then after a while, I kind of just lost it lost its spark for me, because I don't know how else to explain it. I had gone so long without it that it felt less important. I was still having fun doing things. And when I had, an excuse, then it became more like reality, I guess. Anyhow, it's a curious world that, today I can't necessarily claim any benefits alcohol that I'm aware of have for you. And I certainly don't judge anybody that does drink. I think I've been there, and I dig it. I totally understand. But for me, in my life, in my stage of life now, at least, right? I could be different years from now. It seems like something I'm also kind of avoiding and or cutting out. So, anyways.
Yeah. I think that's a good example of, like, I think one of the harder things when you're in eating disorder treatment is that, you go home and you have to eat 3 to 5 times a day. It's not like you come home and you're removed from the substance that was causing your disordered behavior, or you have to get a new friend group because, like, you're not dabbling in drugs or alcohol, right? So food, having an eating disorder, it's like, well, you have to eat the rest of your life. But the alcohol thing is an example of what society does to you when you say, I'm setting a standard for myself. Because the second you say, I don't want to drink tonight, people are like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? They're like, why not? And I think that's a great point back to, I think in the food education space, it needs to be said that maybe we don't need to carry around food rules, but I think it's okay to have standards for your food and flex within that. Like, it's okay for you and I to sit here and say, like, hey, the raw dairy from that cow is just different than the stuff at the store. And that's okay. Doesn't mean you have to be terrified if you have to drink a glass from the store, but, like, I always felt like I couldn't even make that differentiation. Like, that itself was frowned upon. And the moment I realized that, no, we could carry food standards without clinging to our old food rules. And then the true healing comes when we pull our identity out of this thing that we once were, and we properly root it where it should be. And it's those two in combination that I feel like allow you to live a successful life in recovery. And I don't know if that's your same experience too, but it's the food standard thing that I think people get hung up on it. I just had a comment the other day on one of my posts, like, she was really angry and she was like, I have an eating disorder and I don't like that this post is saying something bad about food and this is going to cause your kids to have an eating disorder. And I was like, no, I don't think that's the message we have to give. I think we can convey that real food is healing, and also you're worthy of nourishment, and also, you know what I'm saying? So I'm rambling at this point, but
I dig it.
Yeah.
Standards over rules.
Standards over rules,
Yeah.
Walking in
and
that
I
food
get that
freedom.
too. I feel like I personally won't drink the milk from the store just because I had a cow. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this just like isn't even milk. But sometimes people are like, oh, is this like an eating disorder thing? Like, is that why? I'm like, no, like, you just don't understand that raw milk is pure gold. And like, this milk from the store is not that. And it's just like, I don't want to have something if I'm not going to enjoy it. And it's not from like a disordered place. It's
Totally.
just, I know the quality and I don't want to have
It's a standard.
stuff. Yeah.
It's a standard. Yeah.
Perfectly healthy standard for you to hold. What would be some encouragement as you are walking in your season of recovery right now that you would give to someone that is maybe listening to this and has found themselves resonating with your story?
I would say that whatever you're struggling with is going to help you get somewhere that you could not even imagine being if you weren't going through this. Because I don't think I would have started farming had I not had my eating disorder. I don't think I would be where I am. I think I would have just followed the conventional path and not even question. And that you are valued and that you should get better because you are you. Like, you don't have to prove anything to anyone to deserve to get better. And I feel like for a while I was like, what does it matter if I'm better? I'm just one person. Like, who cares? But it's like, even just now that I'm out of it, knowing what I put my parents through, and it's like, there are people who love and care about you. And even people I didn't even realize, just like my parents' friends who I didn't tell what was happening. They were all like, we were praying for you. Like, we're so happy you're better. Or even people just telling me like that I inspired them by getting better. But like, I didn't actively try to inspire them. Like, people just can see you and you can change someone else's life too.
That's good.
I dig it.
Anything else that you want to cover on this real food journey? Kate, this is your journey. So anything you feel like we didn't cover, any questions you feel like we should discuss?
Well, yeah, actually, I am starting a business about gardening and homesteading.
Oh, let's talk about it.
It's online with one of my friends. And really, my goal is to teach people about homesteading, because that's kind of where I found, because like farming, homesteading, they're kind of intertwined for me. And that's my goal in this life, to eventually have some land and raise all my food. But I understand that not everybody wants to do that or can do that. So we actually started an Instagram page, and our goal is to just share with people how you can kind of live this kind of lifestyle in the suburbs or just in an apartment. Like, you don't have to have all this land. And so I love talking with people about how they can get more connected to their food and start knowing how to grow it, or working on a farm. Like, I really encourage more people to go and work on farms, because you just learn so much, not even just about how to actually raise the food. And like, there's such a strong community in it, and it's just different. Like, it is kind of so funny to me when I tell people I'm a farmer and they're like, what? Because people don't do that where I'm from.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really unique perspective that I think more like people would benefit from, just even volunteering for a day and seeing what it's like.
I love that. So your Instagram is going to be highly educational. Do you have something like a website they can go to? They can learn more?
Not yet, because we really just started this like the beginning of this year.
Okay.
The Instagram is called homesteaders.uncharted. Right now we're talking mostly about gardening, just because that's where our expertise overlaps with me and my friend. And then we want to get more into like cooking from scratch and just sourcing your food and those kinds of things that you could do anywhere. It doesn't matter where you live.
I love that.
I dig it. Yeah, you just heard it. Hit Kate up, and I love that.
Yeah, can they? They should go follow that account, number one. But then I guess stay tuned for future announcements. That's super exciting.
Yeah,
I love
it.
that.
Yeah,
Thanks
super
for sharing.
cool, Kate. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, I feel like that's a wrap on number 4 of your real food journey. I have to say it because you shared so much today that obviously hits home, but I know hits a lot of other people. Thank you for sharing your story. And I know that, when you're talking to just a couple of thousand people or tens of thousands of people, that can be daunting. And it takes a lot of bravery to share where you've been and where you've come to. And even when in that last moment where you were sharing about your new Instagram, like your whole face lit up, and I can just tell that you are living in this beautiful recovery lifestyle, because real food is is a real pillar for you. I just think that's such a beautiful story, and I know you want to continue telling people it. And so thank you for sharing today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Until next time, Kate, thank you so much.